Howdy, folks. It is Wednesday, June 27th, 2012. I'm Skip Ruddertail, your otter editor, and it's the future.
Yeah, it's the future. I am Toonces, the UFO driving cat. Yep.
UFO driving cat, because it's the future.
It's the future because it's taken so
long
to get this out there. Are you driving a space car? No,
I'm driving a space car, because everything in the future is space this. Can you not do that while we're recording? Because it will hear that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You just gotta rip it off.
There.
Yeah.
Keep this in the episode, just so people can know how you scold me.
Right.
He's only trying to protect
slap
you.
Noises
He's only trying to protect you from the ambient noise of me peeling the sticker off the Coke bottle he gave me. Thank you, Skip, for the Coke bottle.
we are in the future.
Yes.
Why? You know how I always say the whole year? You know why I do that?
Why?
I always write out the whole year on forums too, instead of just like 1, 2.
Okay, because you're looking forward.
Well, it's because, and I've been an archaeologist, and I'm like, just in case some archaeologist in 500 years finds this piece of paper from the Department of Motor Vehicles. It may help them out.
You don't have delusions of grandeur at all.
It may help them out a bit. If they're like, oh, well, this is from 2012, not 2112 or 1912. There you go.
We all appreciate, your...
This is serious. I do think about this, though.
No, but it's important that we're in the future, because in this episode we are looking toward the past. And that is, because we've done a story of Pyrostingers before.
Yes,
it was one of his more recent stories, right?
Yes, we have.
Really liked it.
We actually got these in the same batch. Mm-hmm. He sent us 3 stories, and this was the first one we picked.
Yeah.
And then Alex, or Khaki Dog, if you prefer, who happens to be
the Euro
gay man, a European gay man. Yes.
Yeah. But this would have been the other way around if we'd have contracted that to a straight guy, like a gay story. You just go, I just can't do this. I recorded a straight story.
Well, no, and he didn't say that. He didn't say he can't.
I'm aghast.
He didn't say he can't do it. He said he preferred doing the other one, which was more gay. So, and I understand.
No. That's the same thing with the power play. It's the same thing with the power play. That's what it is. Come on now, really.
Well, and he is the owner of Bad Dog Books, so, when these things happen, we kind of say, all right, that's what we're going with.
What happens when these things happen is we do mouse porn this week, and we enjoy this as much.
We wanted to do this one originally, and we told Pyrostinger we wanted to do this, so we decided, we put it on the shelf, we'll come back to it in a few weeks, and that's what we did.
And I'd chosen it because it was kind of sentimental for me, because I just remembered years and years and years ago when Pyrostinger and I were both just kind of like starting to write at the same time thereabouts, and just I remember him sending me the story at one point, asking me to give him like a what's it called,
like a critique,
a beta read. Beta read, I think is the term they use. So yeah, and I liked it then. I like it now, and it's cool just because he's we got to see like how good he had gotten in the last story we did, and now we can like kind of look back and see the origins.
I was developing, and it was funny because he made the comment to me that, I wrote that one a while ago. I'm kind of nervous about having you guys discuss it now. And I don't think he should be.
It's kind of one of those things like, what kind of complaint are you really going to make about it? There's some times where like the wording is a little bit awkward. You hear some things, they sound just a little bit redundant within the moment. But it's really like you see like the potential and the promise there, because I just think the pacing is really nice. So you have the kind of tease scene at the first.
The pacing is great. I really like it.
You have this kind of long, like, not want to say long, but like it's for character development.
Exactly.
It's a bit more than people are often devoting to it. And I thought just the dialogue was really incredibly natural. And
I think that the dialogue in this story really shines. And what I was saying is that it was neat reading this one, which I don't often do, because the dialogue really was very natural sounding, speaking it. And I starting to. It's interesting. I'm starting to feel more comfortable reading these things occasionally.
It's a gay go straight story,
and I'm getting I think I'm getting better at it, but it's interesting just reading it, and I'm learning little things, and when there's a story with awkward dialogue, it's awkward to read it out loud because I want to correct it. And I think I'm enough of an editor and a writer that if there's something that I'm kind of stumbling over, it'll usually take me several takes because I'm wanting to, correct the phrasing, and I have to say it the way they wrote it. And I'm sure I don't always, but this one, was easy to read. And I don't know if you noticed, but I worked a little bit of New York into his accent
You
too, especially as it went along. So just not over
a little bit of the New York.
not
what do you
over
mean
the
by that?
top.
Could you reproduce it for me?
I don't know. I don't know.
Put you on the spot.
Nothing over the top, nothing like cheesy, but worked a little bit of New York in
It's all right.
to his phrases because it seemed to work for him in the way the contractions that Pyrostinger wrote for, and that impressed me too. That I was able to work just a little bit of the accent in a natural way.
Right.
With the words that Pyrostinger wrote him, which says to me that Pyrostinger, had this view, had an accent, had a dialect for Vince, and knew it and wrote it. And that's a lot of talent to pull that off successfully and have it sound convincing.
It is difficult to keep it consistent, too, if you're actually going for dialect and not just, lazy talking.
Right, and it was a realistic dialect, and that it wasn't, over the top, like, golly, or that's obviously not New York. Yeah, forget about it.
Forget about it. Forget about it, Scott.
You use guys,
Use guys.
Use guys.
Whatever.
No, so there wasn't anything like that. And so that shows a lot of talent, I think, to pull off something like that, where it isn't ridiculous and over the top and is very natural sounding.
Right.
The humor I like. That's one of the things I like about the story. It's a very playful,
in the
humorous story.
Just to get as a way to get the characters together. Is they naturally just kind of come together through the humor, and it's sort of necessary, I think, just in keeping the tension that must be in the air neutral.
I think there were a couple points where it wasn't quite spot on, like the little bit about the halitosis bit, just that kind of paragraph in the description. I felt like that was a little forced. And there were a couple occasional little moments like that, but I think overall, the banter and the humor between the two is just really natural seeming. It was really like you could see these people, you can tell just by listening to how they talk to each other, how comfortable they are around each other, and how familiar this kind of conversation is.
And you get the impression that's exactly the kind of person Vince is a very just forward, honest, and I guess comfortable person. And but does that perhaps kind of contrast with the actual character he's playing, which is a guy who is revealing a sort of secret straight inclination? But he's not really. But it's kind of funny because at the beginning part of the story, he's talking about how all her failed dates are pity cases, and they all end in failure, and then the guy breaking down, and then of course he's like trembling as he's putting the tape into the, and like, okay, come on now, really. It's
and that's part of the humor of it.
Yeah,
it's absolutely. Here's a guy. It's one of the fun things about it is here is a confident.
It's about confidence.
Comfortable guy in not being confident in an uncomfortable situation.
It's about the total contrast between confidence and skittishness, because at the very beginning, the whole setup is contrasting Vince's apparent confidence, which is sort of broadcast through his homosexuality in a way, because it explains his comfort around her.
Right.
Numerous times in the story. So, but then as you're starting to see, it's going to be like eroded away, and he's going to start, admitting some heterosexual inclinations.
And that's, of course, why he's not confident, because he defines himself as a gay guy. And so this is something he's not used to. This is something that's a surprise to him.
But do you think it's entirely just about him... Okay, I guess I have to kind of explain a personal story just to be able to get on this. When I was first coming out, I was accused mostly, and I think because I was sort of straight acting, although not intentionally, I was accused mostly of faking it so that I could get ladies.
Wow.
Yeah.
By whom?
By the other straight guys.
See, I was going to say...
So sometimes people feel compelled to in a way, be exceptionally performative and demonstrative of their homosexuality because of their personal circumstances.
Yeah.
Do you think...
And I think especially young people, too, and this is something I was talking about with a friend, that, you know, when you are setting yourself out this way, you know, it's part of defining yourself and what it means to be gay. Is I think a lot of people overcompensate a little bit because they're, you know, setting them out, they're creating a message, you know, sending a message to the world. But
I'm trying to get across a specific thing here, which is the idea of a threat. They're essentially accusing me of being a threat because I'm misrepresenting myself is what they're accusing me of. You know what I'm saying? They're saying I'm trying to prey, essentially, by faking it.
Right.
So, do you think that is where the real tension in the story is? Is that the idea that it might blow open the powder keg of the idea that he hadn't been entirely honest all along, and it had been more of a I don't want to say, like, threat is kind of a strong term, but I use this because it gets applied to straight guys and straight ladies. Straight guys especially. They feel that if you are not especially, like, out there and flamboyant, and they can, like, pin you down and identify it, they feel to a degree threatened by it.
Right.
So then to, you know, kind of validate their fears, aren't you kind of risking retaliation?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is something that hadn't occurred to me until you brought it up just now. But I think it's a very interesting idea, you know, and it is, but...
It's that safe distance that gives the certain confidence, and this story is essentially about the violation of that safe distance.
Well, I just
don't want people to miss the conflict in it, that's all.
And I think one of my favorite lines from the story was about how she started dressing like that, like underwear and open robe, partially to test if he was really attracted to her. Right. And that was half the reason she did it in the first place, was to test him. Which I thought was really, I mean, I love that. I thought it was very clever. And I think it ties to this idea you were talking about.
Do you get the impression, though, that she's trying to lure him out? Because she does entertain the idea herself, doesn't she? That she's more interested in Vince than in the date she's bringing home.
They're both doing it. Yeah, they're both doing it. I mean, that's one of the things I think that you can tell how well the story is written by how really outrageously she's flirting with him. In her poses and this, so there are all these poses beside where she's like stretched over, and it's one of these things
lustily where putting popcorn in her mouth.
Right,
a lot of
and if you stop to think about it for a second, you know, if you really picture in your mind the poses she's doing, you know, think about a woman leaning back over the couch while her breasts are going to be right out there, and she's got an open robe. And when she's thinking about this, when she puts her, you know, she says, she puts her feet up and hugs them to her chest. Well, that's really going to show off her crotch, you know. So every little thing. About this. Well, yeah, because I think it ties in together. I mean, every little thing. I mean, she's outrageously physically flirting with him.
Yeah,
throughout this whole conversation. But I think, you know, probably. How aware of it is she? I don't know.
Well, you almost get the sense she's doing it because she feels safe, kind of just toying with them. So of course, like I'm saying, there's a real conflict in the violation of that trust, because she might not be. We kind of do get a peek into her that she's genuinely interested, but you know, the irony, Vince doesn't get that peek. So.
Well, I mean, they both are, you know, and that's one of the things I like about it is that, you know. Real life is messy, and sometimes things just happen, you know, or we don't always do what we think we'll do, or we don't always fit into the roles that we've formed for ourselves. And that's one of the things I really like about the story, because I think it speaks to that, you know, real life fluidity. And that's one of the things, you know, we always were beaten into in anthropology class was, you know, that people do what they can to make things work for them. You know, and if a role is, you know, works for them in one particular situation and a different role works for them in another particular situation, they'll play two different roles. And I think most people who are, you know, inventive and creative people do that all the time. So that's one of the things I really like about this story, and that kind of message.
So it's a story about role switching.
Life is messy,
It's a story about role switching.
That's not a bad
saying.
thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Partially. That this isn't a bad thing, and that it's an interesting thing and a fun thing.
Yeah.
I love some of the other humorous lines. I love like
I like what it
you
says
smell
about
like popcorn, and you smell like popcorn. I know. Love that.
I just like the kind of frank discussion of porn.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like kind of like, why do you like porn?
Yeah.
I don't always want to fuck somebody.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that's pretty straightforward. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or
that's
that
right.
very honestly very true statement, which something that I think guys are pretty good at knowing, and I think most women are, but. You read in the advice column some things.
Our side
well,
of the
you read
opinion.
some column that sometimes people writing in, like, why is my guy watching porn, or why is he masturbating? And it's like, right, because getting somebody else into bed and doing things with them is work, and sometimes you don't want to do that work.
I'd rather my partner just jerked off every time he had to, than like always coming over to bug me, hon. I'm reading. Come on now, can't you just rub one out? I mean, it's just because his sex drive is so much stronger than mine, to be honest with you.
Well, but I mean, you gotta like the attention.
It's true because it means he's always ready when I am.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's Bun's feeling, Yeah. So that's okay. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, because you have porn.
Right, exactly.
But it makes me, from my perspective,
that's the only time when it's a problem. I think is it's like we haven't had sex in 3 weeks, but he. Wax off all the time, then it's a problem.
Right. Well, I think that's a different thing, though. Just from my perspective, though, it just makes porn seem incredibly useless to me, though, because the podcast is fun, but ever since when I have a regular partner, I just don't look at much porn. It just doesn't come to the front of my mind.
I do every day.
Oh my goodness.
Every day.
I'm trying to,
I usually don't pod. I don't usually pod visual stuff. It's stories. Usually is what I pod
stories.
to.
Yeah.
Nope. It's the stories, which is why we're here.
You can't fantasize in your own head.
Oh yeah, no, dude, totally. But we're talking about porn. No. I was talking about specific types of porn.
I shouldn't tease.
Yeah. So, no, but I really enjoyed this one. It's a fun story. I love the characters. They're very, fun and realistic people. We get a nice little bits of discussion about species, which I'm always interested in when we're talking about furry stories too. Yeah. There are a couple lines that she says or thinks to herself, which is one with the dog, and she said, "I didn't even get that interesting fight or flight reflex going." Which I thought, because she's a mouse, and so prey species and dogs are, predator species, at least somewhat. And then later on, she says, well, she's always more comfortable with rodents. And I love that juxtaposition. And I think that speaks so well to, real life sexuality again, where she's sometimes going for different things, where she's like, maybe I get along better with other rodents, but, I also like, this interesting fight or flight response that I get in the, hind part of the brain.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool, too. On a kind of unrelated note, there was, I'm always, I guess it is related because I said, I'm always looking at porn every day.
Right.
But I enjoy, on Sofer, you can sort by popular or by week. Or month or whatever, and I kind of like browsing that and seeing what other folks are liking, which I think is interesting. So
it's usually not anything like this. It's usually not stuff you'd want to see. What's popular is not good is best represented by sorting by kink.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot. Well, right, there's this.
Furry.
There's that inverse correlation between the obscurity of the kink and the, I mean, there's a little bit of there's junk in there because it's somebody, a bunch of people's favorite kink. But then there's a lot of stuff that's...
It's like the Ron Paul crowd. It's best it's like the Ron Paul crowd, except if Ron Paul were a kink on Sofer.
Right, exactly.
It would have 800,000 views. It'd be top really for top viewed for the month.
Right.
Yeah, that's Ron Paul on Sofer.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. But then there are a lot of really good stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff too. And so I'm not going to... name names since we didn't invite this person to the story.
Come on.
But I was reading one this week, which was really well written, or not. I mean, it wasn't the best thing I've ever seen written, but they were a good writer, and it was well done.
Okay. Quality writing.
Quality writing, and this is on the popular for the week list, and it concerned two deer people, and a bunch of interesting ideas going on in this story. So one, it was sort of, I don't know, I got the feeling that maybe it was kind of like a feudal kind of setting.
A feudal setting,
and
how do you mean?
Well, that they were outside the city in kind of like peasant farmers maybe, or something like that, or yeoman farmers, and there was definitely some comments in there which I liked. Some world building going on. The city and these guys basically lived their whole lives out in the country, and they were never going to get there.
Right.
Which I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Setting up this world, and maybe these people are trapped in it, and what are they going to do? So it gives the impression
like lordships and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But these people aren't the lords, and I think a lot of times, especially when in furry stories or fantasy stories or porn fantasy stories, maybe when we're set in like a feudal setting, well, we're usually talking about the lords, or we're usually talking about the haves. I feel, rather than the have-nots. And so this is kind of cool because this couple were definitely the have-nots. They had their farm, but
lower class porn story.
Right. They were kind
working
of like
man's
peasant dirt farmers. Yeah.
Working man's.
There you go. Though pre-industrial evolution, pre-Marxist and all. I've been meaning
to write like working man's porn, like the brotherhoods of the engineers, like in the late 1800s transcontinentals, like
that'd be awesome.
Like get your steamship over here. I don't know.
And, reading this story, and I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. They're setting up some different ideas, and we're, talking about we're injecting some ideas of class and place in the story. So I'm already getting, interested. And it's a porn story. But I think about these things all the time. I can't help it. Like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. Where are they going to take this? And then we get to this conceit, this idea of the story that I found so repugnant and objectionable.
Really? There's there's one thing in the story
yes,
this is not the bee's knees.
It really destroyed it for me. And I finished reading it. Well, the idea, and again, interesting idea.
What is it?
The idea was that the male deer are bipedal. The male deer people are bipedal.
Oh dear.
And the female deer people are quadrupedal.
Oh, that's gross.
Well, and now, I know you're saying it's gross, but we've done, bipedal, quadrupedal. Like, Candrel had that story. And they're both people. They're talking,
I get it,
and they're like married and stuff. So I'm like, okay, but
what it implies is clearly at first.
Exactly, and that's where it takes me is the implications.
So you just take that first initial blush of like kind of aversion to something that just like on its face really kind of gross for a reason, and then you just throw it into misogyny land. Is what you're essentially saying.
Well, yeah. Let me
this
get
is
there.
gross, and it's being forced on the female characters. So therefore,
and the story even goes on to say, the creator. I mean, this person lays out kind of the religious framework of the world and says, the creator, or whoever the deity figure was, the males build things, and the females, are the guardians of nature and have the children. And this is the part where it really turned me off, really upset me, because, and this goes back to something we've talked before, how science fiction and fantasy can often be mirrors to the present culture, where it's a way of distancing yourself, but talking about a subject. So I'm going to break up an issue of racism or whatever, but I'm going to do it with the, the people
essentially you're saying you dislike this because it's someone who's fetishizing misogyny, essentially.
Yeah,
like that. And
I think so, because it's a way of, it's not even an option. Like, women can't build things because they don't have hands in this world.
Right.
So they have to stay home and be the guardians of nature and tend the children. And it's such a repugnant idea because it is an idea that we see in our real world.
So what's your response to this? because you said it was like quality writing, and like you just like all you like is quality writing, right? Can't you just like appreciate it for what it is and just like
No, I don't
swallow
think
the worldview?
I don't think so. Because there is an implicit message within the story that I feel is inherently anti-feminist and inherently misogynist, and I don't think you can pull that apart from the story. That the story is inherently.
What's that thing you always say you are, where you're interested in people from history? What's that called again?
A historian?
Paleontologist? Whatever.
Archaeologist?
Anthropologist? Anthropologist, that's the one. Aren't you being, you're kind of like you're refusing to read a message about something that is, represented in culture because you're personally, gross, like, disturbed by it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one thing to have like that first blush, like, oh, that's kind of weird, like they're on 2 legs, they're on 4. Mm-hmm. I think when it becomes that so far out there, can't you just make a conceit to just wanting to understand what the thought is?
That's the thing.
And just, you don't have to like think like, this is so terrible that this exists. You don't just want to like, scan and understand.
So well written enough.
Oh, so you were worried it was going to start convincing people?
No, not that, but the we've talked about this before.
You thought the soul could be saved.
If sci-fi is a way of talking, is a safe way of talking about the way things should be.
That's what you're saying. That's what you're asserting is should be.
But I think we've seen how science fiction stories can do that. And, or a fantasy setting. And most furry stuff, I think, is sci-fi or fantasy. And it can be a way of talking about the way life should be. And taken in that light, it's a really troubling argument that the story is making. That, women should be, sitting at home having babies or whatever.
This was at the top of the popularity of the So Furry list, basically.
It was, I don't think it was the first one or anything, but it was on the, top for the week.
So, what you're saying is you just are discouraged by how popular the sentiment seems to be when
let's put it this way.
Obfuscated in this way.
Let's put it this way. Taboo is very powerful erotically, and we've talked about this as well. And there are things that we like reading about that may arouse us that we would never do or condone in real life.
Right.
That's, I think, something that maybe speaks to the story's defense.
That's what I was kind of thinking. I was thinking the same thing.
Right, exactly.
You don't have to presume that this guy is using this as a means to convince himself to go out there and, be a chauvinist pig, whatever.
Right.
He might be a guy who's just more struggling with just a sense of
or maybe setting up.
Femininity.
I mean,
I don't know.
Be.
My first response is always just to be defensive of art production.
And it may be that his rationale is, how am I going to set this up? Because he's like, I like thinking about bipedal furries and quadrupedal furries, and how am I going to make that happen? And this all may be setting that up.
So it's just he took a wrong turn somewhere. Is what you're saying?
For me anyway.
Took a wrong turn. Just took a wrong turn.
For me,
dude, no, you didn't realize you're way in misogyny, Tim.
You
got way into misogyny, Tim. You just didn't even notice.
So let's go back to Candle's story for a minute. Okay. Where we have bipedal and quadrupedal furries doing it.
Right.
Why doesn't this go there? And maybe there are a couple reasons. One is because it's guys in having sex in the story. And I think we don't have... there is a narrative, and it's pretty widely cross-culture that women, and like Sarah Hurdy, I think, has written papers about, the academic papers about how male is to culture as female is to nature. And so it's a common cultural construct that is acted in ways to restrict women's access to things. So there's that. There's also... in that story, we're also kind of in, he's in a computer. He's in like an online setting. And so there are all these little things that kind of remove it and distance it. And there's no explicit discussion of this is the way God made it. Right. And maybe that's the part that crossed the line for me. The explicit discussion of this is the way God or the creator or whatever it was in the story ordained it. And that's the part that I found the most repugnant.
I thought we got past the idea that it was disturbing because it just kind of implies zoophilia.
Well, I don't care.
Even
That
though that
I
isn't in the
think
story,
that bothered you. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
as
that's what
long
I'm
as
saying.
they're people and they can talk, I don't care what shape they're in.
I'm trying to continue on from that point though. What really unnerves you is just the idea that this construct would be used in a way to
What unnerves me is the idea that this is a commentary on our world.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what unnerves me.
Yeah, but why do you have to rush to its defense? I don't know. I don't get it. It just seems like we're so passive and accepting of all other things so long as it's in text, just because it is an exploration of ideas and things that may not be good in the world. But this is something that you really latch on to critique. It's I don't know. It makes me wonder, because I know I'm just always I always want to defend things. I don't know. Like I said, it obviously expresses something that's repugnant, but lots of things express things that are repugnant. And it's better just to understand them rather than just to go outright and attack them. And maybe it is so offensive to women's sensibilities, maybe to, wait for their voices to speak up on it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think those are really good points. And I guess I'd say we all have our things that set us off. We all have our things that make us uncomfortable. And this was one. And there's that too. It struck me as just
weird that this was the thing that really got your dander up. I think
the partially it was the structural way, and it's laid out too. It's a structural way to objectify people, and as an anthropologist, and you should too.
But
as a Marxist, you're always looking out for structural things.
Obviously, it's a terrible thing, but maybe that's just someone playing with an idea and massaging it out of their muscles their own way.
Yeah,
I just think it seems strange to just immediately jump to grab something by the throat, which you thought was actually kind of written with quality.
Yeah, and I think maybe what it was, and I'm trying to think about this now because you're bringing up really good points, and maybe what it was, like if you write a story where the Twinkie raccoon says to the bear like, oh yeah, call me a bitch or whatever, come on my face, like you're not saying that all raccoons are bitches.
No.
And maybe that was what did it for me, is I felt like it wasn't like a role playing or in the moment thing or a personal choice. It was the idea that all subset of people are X, and maybe that's what got me more than anything. But no, it's interesting the points you bring up and trying to think about why this particular thing got to me or not.
I don't know. I feel as if I'm actually conceding a lot of the larger points, Steve, because it reflects misogyny. It probably, as I said, it probably was written by a guy who is probably even maybe unconscious, I would say, of his own thoughts toward it. And I would just wonder if not, it weren't more.
Well, I
considered approach to that, and him actually trying to, if he's making these. It's so clear it's to almost be literal. You have to wonder if he's just not trying to work the concepts out himself. And sometimes when you express things, they sound silly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And maybe what it is too is what sounds to me like a really cool story is the doe who wants to build things. Like that's a cool story.
The doe that wants to build things, of course. Yeah.
That's a really interesting story in this world. Like a doe who wants to build things. That's cool. And maybe part of it, too, is a frustration of, wow, we set up, this opportunity to fight the power. And instead we're like, the power is great. Which I think you can hopefully appreciate.
But what confused me initially about, with this plus your interest in anthropology was, isn't that kind of a historical record of a culture then? Because if you just wanted this to be a pure record of how somebody considers a makeup of a culture, wouldn't you just want it to, probably reflect the bad and the good? Well, because the closest thing I was actually thinking of comparing it to was the Amish community from close where I'm from, because it's a very closed, fundamental, regressive in any kind of civil rights community, but the only stories people are interested within this community are the stories of the people that escape, that go on Rumspringa and become the ex-Amish. any actual story of the community itself and try to understand what it actually is, how its ideas function, people are just so immediately disgusted by that. It's like they won't even consider. They won't even try to give thought. They won't even give space in their head to try to consider it.
And
that's what I think is
I think maybe that's coming from where you grew up, because I think most of the country, they think, oh, the Amish, how quaint. Like, I don't think they have negative associations with the Amish for most of the country. So I think that's interesting that you bring that up.
People don't have negative associations with the Amish, really?
I don't think so. I'd be interested to see what our other, listeners have to say. But certainly,
the kindest association people have with the Amish is that they're too stupid to use electricity. Come on now.
I don't think so. I think, where I grew up, it was, they're hardworking and they're simple and they're farmers, and those are all good, American values.
I always see it pushed more through a religious fundamentalist lens.
See, I don't think, that is what it is. Most people in America aren't aware of the religious aspects of the Amish.
But that's what they all say, is that they can't use the electricity because of their religion. They understand it's a religiously fundamentalist sect. They just never really think of the fact that there is religious fundamentalism of that degree in the United States.
Exactly.
And that is because the only interest anybody has in the Amish is in the stories of people that are escaping.
No, I'd say most of the country, the only interest
in the culture itself, because they don't want to actually understand the culture itself. I think the only
interest most of the country has is, oh, that's cool, we'll go to their shop and buy some things. I mean, true. I'm serious. Yeah. I don't think they're thinking about people. I don't think they're even aware of people escaping or whatever. They're interested in, they make really cool handmade things that I can put in my house. And I think that's how most of the country thinks of that.
I guess I was the only one watching Ex-Amish on Nat Geographic.
Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't even know about it, so. It's interesting. And that's always, this is something that I thought was really interesting. One of the things we always talk about in anthropology is that the interesting question is, not what the rules are, but what happens to the person who breaks the rules or who wants to do something different. And that's kind of where you see where a culture is at and how tolerant a culture is what happens to the people who say no.
Right, so then if this hopeful
and we don't know in this story
was
we don't know
down,
we don't know in this story.
You would find that to be a
because
terrible
the story isn't about that. The story isn't about anybody saying no. This is about people who are fine with everything.
Oh, okay.
And maybe that's also a little objectionable to me, that it's a story about people who are okay with the world.
And it's just weird to me that you find a story objectionable. I think that's what's kind of strange to me. So you've told me at times about stories that you didn't think were very well written, or concepts you thought were kind of weird, but you've never said you found a story itself objectionable. It seems like it's just because it's something you don't like and it's popular.
I think it's objectionable because it's political enough, and I really dislike the politics in it. Which I hope you can understand.
Well, of course, I don't like it too. I'm just saying. I guess I'm applying a meaner bent toward it.
Well, no. This is one of the reasons that we're good podcasting buddies, is because we, tend to take up different tacks for the sake of argument, because it makes a more interesting podcast.
Scan and understand. So. That's my motto.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get angry about things people do, but when I read something, it's just usually just funny.
So
I just want to I'd want to commit some of that material to memory just to mock it. That's what I'd want to do. And if the material is going to be quality, you just have to riff off of it, basically.
I suppose.
Kind of like Ayn Rand. If people are going to read Ayn Rand, fuck it, I'll just make fun of Ayn Rand. I'll tell you.
Well, here's the thing, Orson Scott Card. This is what it reminded me of, where it's you've got a good writer who has terrible politics, and they've gotten worse, and terrible views. Ender's Game is great. Speaker for the Dead is a fantastic book, and it's a great sci-fi and anthropology book. It's the kind of thing where I had an advisor say every anthropologist should read it, because it has these great ideas. But especially as he has gotten older, Orson Scott Card is now famously homophobic. And so what do you do, when you read that story, and if they're a good writer and are just rolling out these terrible ideas.
Just make it gay. Just make it as gay as you can.
Okay.
But, all right. Doing that oftentimes means participating to a degree, which is also my approach toward log cabin Republicans.
But I think
if you can't tolerate gay Republicans, like you are not a very forward-looking individual. I think that's my opinion. If you really,
but I think too, just like with Orson Scott Card, like if you see stuff, that is, homophobic, or in this case is sexist, I think you should say it. I mean, I think
that's what I'm saying.
I think you should call it for what it is. I think you should say, "Man, this story, which is well written, is
there's
really
a certain
fucking
distinction.
sexist."
There's a certain distinction I have to make when I'm kind of mocking something. When I'm mocking something, I'm making sort of an admission that I like it to a degree, that it was quality enough for me to like it, but there's something about it that just deserves being mocked. And I don't know, I feel like if you want to mock this story, go ahead and mock the story, but you have to, like you're saying, I'm not going to name any names, but come on, if you want to mock the story, like give him a shout out, let him get some views to the story, and then like detail the stuff that you thought was stupid. I just think this is kind of a very passive way of going about it.
Well, I wanted to throw it up as kind of a scenario, as what do you do when you run into even something as innocuous as a furry story? Did you leave
a snotty comment?
I didn't.
You did not leave a snotty comment?
I didn't. Well, I'm doing it right now.
I'd have left a very snotty comment. I'd have waited for him to leave a snotty comment back to me.
I think I'm doing it right now.
So. I'd have waited for him to leave a snotty comment back to me, and then I'd have started an internet fight with him. And then we could have butted heads right then and there to be over. Yeah. Either I'd have looked stupid, he'd have looked stupid. It would have been good fun. I happen to think
this might be an interesting conversation for the podcast, though. Heaven forbid. And hopefully it has been.
That's just not your nature. You always yell at me when I start drama.
I do.
Because
sometimes you start drama for the sake of starting drama.
Well, yeah. That's entertainment.
Okay, see there, and that's how we differ. I try to start drama over things that I actually feel are important. So,
that's called being sanctimonious.
This probably isn't, but it was something that I want to call attention to. Even a furry story. What do you do? What do you say? Or what do you think about when you're reading a porn story, and you run into something that's just you find objectionable, as you pointed out the phrase I used.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, listeners, if you have any comments to throw in there, or when you've run into a story like that and how you felt or reacted.
Yeah, the thing is, a story that you thought was like well written, there's quality, it might have otherwise appealed to your tastes, but just had some kind of fundamental understanding within it. That you just
shaping of the world in this case that really messed things up for you. And cool. So I'd be interested to hear if people have run into that.
Send Skip emails.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it clearly, I'm glad I read the story. Clearly, and I finished it. I didn't stop or anything, and it clearly, I didn't paw to it.
Okay. Thank you for
the porn story. But, it clearly got me thinking about things, and so I'm glad I read it. So, yeah. I don't know, do you have any, I think we're pretty good, and dinner should be racing. Do you have any other...
I'm hungry.
...gems of wisdom to add, sir?
I got nothing. We can fight and shout some more. It's always fun.
Rawr. Okay. So, all right. Well,
I got nothing.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for waiting.
Yes, thanks for waiting. We'll try to be better. Both of us starting new jobs at the same time, or almost the same time, was probably not good, so, but we're not complaining because we have jobs now.
Also, it's summer, and I'm being lazy and enjoying the weather.
So we'll try to, I was like saying to the tunes the other day, if you don't hear from me, you got to give me a call or vice versa. So we'll try to keep on each other's toes better.
All right.
All right, guys. Catch you next time.
Book club will never die. Ciao.